Welcome to another podcast of ArchVeda. I am your host, Anashuiya Bhattacharya, and today we have a very special guest with us, architect Diana Kellogg from New York. Architect Diana Kellogg's design philosophy centers on the transformative potential of spatial design. She believes in creating spaces that profoundly impact lives, a principle vividly demonstrated by her projects, including the award-winning Gyan Center in Jaisalmer, Rajasthan. This sustainable project serves as a testament to a dedication to community and environmental responsibility. Welcome to the show, ma'am. It's an honor to have you with us.
Oh, thank you so much. It's lovely. Lovely to be here.
So, I always love to start the episode by knowing a personal aspect of the person's life. So, what sparked your journey in architecture? How did you begin the career that has gone so far?
Well, it's kind of a silly thing a little bit, but as a child, I was always building things. We built tree houses. We built um, different kinds of structures all over our property. I was always a little bit of an adventurer doing that. And then there was one time when my parents were doing a renovation of a garage that we had on our property, and my aunt, who was an interior designer, who was actually the only woman, or not the only one, but one of the few women that I worked that I knew that worked at least outside of the home. And the contractor came and he took this one block, a rectangular block, and then he picked up two different blocks, put it on top of the rectangular block, and he said, "You can have this one or you can have this one." And I think I was 12 and I was like, that's magic.
Okay.
It's like, how do you could do that so easily just with your hand. And obviously it takes more than that. But yeah, I was just really interested in the idea of transformation and making things, just the awe and the inspiration for making something that was, relatively banal into something special.
So you've had like hands-on experience with designing spaces, knowing creativity since a young age. And I think at the end of the day, if we look around with architecture, it's everywhere, right? So your inspiration can come from anywhere and everywhere. So I think that is how I also started with architecture. I just knew it's I think it's more of a you get attracted to it, right? And I feel like that was the same way for you.
Yeah. Well, you know what I always say? It's like you don't find architecture, it finds you, and there's no
Completely
getting away.
And I think, yes, there isn't. And I feel for most architects, it's the same way, right? Like you said, you don't find architecture, it comes to you. So, you've been practicing for some time.
Yes.
And you've had a variety of projects. So, what's your design philosophy? When you are designing, what's that thought that comes in your mind?
I like to take a lot from kind of what I call just what's the given aspects of a project. Where is it? What materials do you have to work with? What are the sort of basic fundamentals to the project? And then for me, it's very, very important to have a design concept. It actually is the thing that you go back to kind of hold the project together. It helps you. It's an organizing principle that actually makes the project sing really and make sense. And it can be a concept that only you think about. Like, for example, with the school, I personally named the buildings the cradle, the eye, and the womb, which just helped me kind of go back and forth. I didn't speak to people about that, but that's having a larger concept is what I think makes buildings really resonate. And I think you don't actually need to even know what it is that the concept is.
Resonate.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Actually, I think at the end of the day, we are not designing just for ourselves, right? It's also about the users, how they respond to it, how they resonate with it. So that's very true. Speaking of which, So you initially started Diana Kellogg Architects with projects that were mostly high-end residential and other projects. And then eventually there was a move towards community work and other such projects. So how did that transition actually happen?
Well, um, I had always done community work throughout. This little kind of splattering of projects. Um, but just a lot of it has to do with practicality. I'm in New York City. I had children. I couldn't travel far. I um And that's the kind of work you generally get as a small practice in New York. I'd never wanted to work for a large firm, so those large projects weren't necessarily going to come to me. And then when this opportunity came, it was perfect timing, and it was really everything that I'd always wanted to do in terms of kind of design concept, reaching out beyond just the individuals living in the high-end residential, um, and actually having more of an impact. One of the things I like very much about architecture and working in architecture is when you see a space you've created and to see how the people occupy it, how they move in it.
Yeah.
And so instead of just seeing, one family, you get to see how the entire community interacts with it. And that's been a joy to see with the school.
But as an architect also, I think different clients require different types of buildings or have different requirements. So how do you're still working for other projects as well, other than the community and the non-profit work?
Yes.
So how do you as an architect find that balance? And also as a human being, right? How do you find that balance?
Well, I mean, for me now, the residential work is something that I'm so familiar with that I um I sort of joke I can do it while I'm sleeping. Basically, it's kitchens, baths, it's the way the rooms are configured for a specific family. Um and those are kind of your materials you have to work with. And then the community projects just make me, you know, jump up in the morning, especially since I have the privilege to work in a lot of different countries. I'm doing projects in Africa, Mongolia, and India as well. And I love the challenge of trying to get to know the culture and to understand what's the kind of very pertinent and interesting aspects of a culture that I can bring to life, or I can bring not to life, to light. I can like enhance and make that the thing that's kind of driving the design. And I think that an advantage of being a foreigner is that you can see things that people in their own countries actually can't see because you're so used to it, and you're sort of we tend to devalue things that we're familiar with or that we don't actually honor as unique. And I think that's a whole trend that has to change in architecture or in everything.
Yeah. Like you said, I think at the end of the day, when we look from an outsider's perspective, it's a clean slate, right?
Yeah.
Like what you said, you're used to a particular culture. For me, it's India. For you, it's the US. But since you've practiced in so many different places and with architecture, every place has a unique architectural style. So how do you think architecture as a practice also varies? Obviously, it does vary from country to country. So, how does it vary? And as architects, at the end of the day, our goal is the same, to create spaces for the people.
Right.
So how do you think that also comes together at the end of the day?
Well, I think just what you said. Our goal is to create spaces for the people, and I think in doing so, it's very important to get at a lot of the things that are important to that culture. Like, you don't realize so much that in your body, you remember things. Your body remembers patterns of being in a certain space, a smate or a pace. a space that has light from your grandmother's house or a smell from here or there. And all of this stuff is part of your body and it actually regulates you and centers you. And I think that that's one of the things that's so critical. I also think it's very interesting because I'll be with a client or wandering around a space and I'll notice things and they'll sort of be like, oh, what is that? That's nothing particularly special. And I'm like, yes, it is. Yeah, quite beautiful. Or we also have associations between things that we kind of have to move out of, and I think that in a lot of countries, what is old is has a funny balance of being revered and also being considered outdated.
Yeah.
And modern and Western is I, no comment.
I think that is, I mean, obviously no comment because everyone has their own opinion, but I feel like modernity with tradition is what is the need of the hour. We cannot completely discard the traditional practices because at the end of the day, it's there for a reason. So it's all about bridging that gap, right? And I think, speaking of which, your project, and most of the people know it, but I just want to give a gist about it to the audience. So, ma'am has designed the famous, it's one of the most famous buildings in India right now, the Rajkumari Ratnavati Girls School in Jaisalmer. And I think in India, or in fact globally, as an architect, it's from a perspective of an architect and as someone who also has been seeing the building, it's one of the most famous and talked about building in India and globally in recent times. So, what was your inspiration behind it? You've mentioned before that, with you, it's more about the context of the space or the local materials and all of that local craftsmanship. So when you were designing it, what was the main inspiration that you had? And with, with the issues that, let's say, women or girls face in Jaisalmer today, what did you resonate? What drove you to actually design that?
I mean, I think one of the things that was very important to me, I actually had brought my daughter on many of the trips that I went on. And I often thought about what it was like for the mothers to have their daughters and to want them to have an education. And how could I best serve that? How could I make both the families and the girls feel comfortable and proud to go to the school? And that was a very important kind of driving force. And also beyond that, feeling safe. Safety was something that I think as women and girls everywhere, we have to take special care.
And I feel architecture has the power to actually make someone feel empowered and safe, right? Like with the forms or the way you design it, it's at the end of the day, we talk a lot about gender studies nowadays. So, with architecture also, I think there's a lot of ways to actually put that into architecture as well. We'll come to that. I think I have a separate question for that because I think as architects, we need to start talking about it. We'll just talk about the form of the building as well. So in your interviews and other places, you mentioned about how important the elliptical form of the building is in the form of the womb of a mother and the courtyard. You wanted a small distance between the courtyard and all of that. So can you just explain to our viewers about what your perception was with the form that you have? With architecture, it's not just about, I mean, obviously creating spaces, function and form. So what was your thought behind the form?
Well, there's always that moment where there's that beautiful kind of coming together, if you're lucky, of function, form, and some other essence of spiritual beauty, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. And somehow once I started working with the ellipses, it felt right. And it felt very powerful. And I think, I do think that there are shapes that are naturally conceived of as more feminine, which are curves. And
Yeah, yeah, I think that is actually true with shapes and with everything. We have a perception about feminism, feminine, and all of that. So that's actually very true. I mean, I'm
yeah.
sure most people will agree.
Well, I had the privilege of having Zaha Hadid as one of my teachers when I was in school. She was a guest critic, but I remember very distinctly her saying that women are better designers. And the reason is sit with ideas, to have patience and to gestate and to let the ideas percolate, because we are even biologically designed to have children. And I always think about that with her fluid forms and all of her incredible shape shifting and uh, ingenuity. And it's interesting because she didn't have children, but yet she said that.
That is actually something to think about, right?
Yeah. So that's always something that I've really had in the back of my mind, or it's just, certain people say things to you at a certain time and they stay with you. So, yeah.
Gives me something to take in, I feel.
Yeah.
That's now, I'll go and tell people and I'll tell them that, I heard it from you. I think that's how you pass on knowledge, right?
Yeah. Well, there's also a very pragmatic aspect to the ellipse, which I actually didn't know at the time. I mean, I think sometimes you know things intuitively and so you do them, but like the elliptical form has been used for centuries as a way to capture wind
Okay.
and as a way for the wind to flow inside the courtyard. Because obviously, if you have a straight corner, the wind gets caught. Whereas if you have fluid shapes, the wind moves. And what more would we want to capture in the desert than
Exactly.
wind in these incredible heats? So
I think it's also a lot of technical thought behind these kind of designs when you want climate responsive designs as well. And I read somewhere that actually the temperature within the school is actually lesser than what it is outside. So I feel like architecture has the power to do something like that, create comfortable spaces. So with architecture, since we are an architectural podcast, but we also talk about culture and art. So, as an architect, how do you think we can empower craftsmen, local artisans? Because that's something that you've incorporated into the design. So, how did you do that, and what was the response of the local people there?
um um uh, I feel like it's very fundamental for a lot of different reasons. One, it's practical.
Yes.
It's also very important, in my opinion, to get the community involved. Just for having a pride of in the craftsmanship in the building. Um, Also, just another completely practical concept is that if the craftsmen are local and they are by virtue of that, they are actually doing what is natural to that particular area and that community. Um, it's just simple. Some of these things are just simple basics, which is if something is needs to be repaired, they're right there.
Yes.
For example, a lot of people kept insisting that I get the light fixtures in Delhi. And I kept saying, no, we're going to try to do everything locally. And, everything in the desert, because of the wind and the sand and the heat, everything that has too many moving parts gets destroyed and breaks really easily. So I actually got the electrician. I said, I want you to design the light fixtures for me. And he said, no, 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 I don't know how to design light fixtures. And I was like, well, you're the one that brought the power to this location. I've seen it everywhere. You've done it brilliantly. And I just want you to bring power to this source. And then the stonemasons will make a box around it and a translucent stone to act as a shade. and then you design a light fixture.
And I'm sure he must have been proud of what he created after that, right? I'm sure he was. What was his reaction to the final product?
I think he was happy. I got very, I had a lot of responses like that. I had a lot of instances where I was like, I know you can design a light fixture.
It's actually empowering them in so many ways, right? After this project, I'm sure, they have a portfolio to show to people that, this is what I can do.
For light fixtures, yes, and actually they're necessary in buildings like this.
Yes.
And they don't need to be repaired.
Yeah, very true. And as architects, we bring in an entire community to finally bring the end product. So, but when we are designing from our thought process of what the client wants in some way or the other. But also, at the end of the day, the design is not complete without seeing what the user's response is to it.
Yes.
You might have designed the entire thing, but at the end of the day, it's a good project and you've done well enough when you see how people respond to the entire project and how they use those spaces. And sometimes, they also kind of change the spaces based on how they want to use it. And I think that's the beauty of it. Someone say using that that final structure. So I'm sure you've heard about how amazing the project is to people, not just architects, but to other people as well. And I feel like it's one step towards empowering women and that. So when you finally saw the girls use this space, how did you feel as a human being, as an architect, mostly as a human being? How did you feel?
There's no words to describe what it felt like. I think I got very quiet and was just watching how they were moving around the space. And the the thing is they often moved in circles in this phase.
Okay.
And I actually brought a friend to see it, and we get out. It's incredibly hot. She jumps out of the car and she starts just running around the building and up on, she's a runner, and up on the roof. And I'm trying to keep up with her just because the spirit of it. She's my guest. She's just running out to her everywhere. And it was, I said to her after, I said, Sharon, why did you do this so hot? And she said, I just felt like that's what I should do in this space.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I do think spaces help or guide you to conduct yourself in certain ways. And I like to think of this building as a space of joy and a space of kind of a safe place for your imagination and for your energies to soar, and for your curiosity to go wherever it needs to go. I mean, one of the things about the building is because of the walls, all you see is the sky.
Oh.
So that's where you aim. That's where you're going. And I also think one element of the design is that it's not big, but it feels very monumental. So it feels like this place of importance into these young girls. They actually call it the college.
Okay.
And
they've made the place their own.
they have.
And that's, I think, at the end of the day, that's how you know that this is it. This is the project that I wanted, and this is how I wanted it to be. And you must be feeling great about it. So, like I spoke, over the years, gender studies has become one of the most important subjects, and people have started talking about all of that. So, what do you feel as an architect, or in terms of architecture, how can architecture create safe spaces? You've already mentioned it. How can architecture create safe spaces for women? And as architects, how can we go forward with it? Because at the end of the day, I always say this, architecture is a huge field. There are so many things, the technical part of it, this, that, and psychology actually. So how do you create, as an architect, how do you feel you can create that kind of a space?
I think that's a very very difficult question because feminine shapes, feminine spaces, feminine forms are things that both genders can enjoy and appreciate and need, to be honest. I don't think young girls exclusively liked the feeling of being held. I think that young boys do as well. So it's an interesting, really interesting question. How it's resolved, it's an ongoing quest, an ongoing exploration, and I'm glad people are talking about it in schools because they hadn't been. Um, you know, there's some very obvious things that has to do with our physiology, which generates the thought about different shapes. But I think it's beyond that. It's more of just a feeling, and a feeling of being accepted. It's a feeling of not having a hierarchy to the spaces.
Yes.
And not having something that's one, that's gender normative in one way or another, but to have a balance and a play between the whole thing. I mean, I mentioned Zaha Hadid, but if anyone does, one would classically call feminist architecture or female
Yes.
architecture would be her. But it's about fluidity and movement, which I think that's something women are very good at. On the other hand, it's very strong. We know it's not something that is like soft, to hear or whatever. It's like, oh,
Yes.
here I am. This is what we're doing.
Very true. And when you mention hierarchy of spaces, it's actually true that, with hierarchy of spaces and how they create spaces, it can actually distinguish between the genders, which we've seen in the past. I mean, whatever, like Hawa Mahal, the way we cover women, or we used to, obviously we used to, but those actually separate spaces, like, seating for differently for women. And with time, that has changed. And like you said, fluidity. It's about also creating the safe space for women. And I think feminist architecture is doing well. Like, we've been talking about it, people are working towards it, and I think we have a long way to go, but we're through halfway, I think, right?
Yeah.
So it's been a pleasure talking to you. I mean, I have a lot of questions to ask, and I'm sure a lot of people are curious about the projects and what you do. But thank you for taking out so much of your time. It's been an honor to talk to you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Namaste. Have you been able to talk in Hindi?
You know,
Do you want to say something to our viewers in Hindi?
I so wish I could. I I I I tried.
Yes, we'll just end it by saying namaste. Namaste.
Just it's a really hard language.